Nonetheless, it's certainly obvious that, or should be obvious to people, although maybe it's not, that legal remedies are always going to be confronted with the reality of how people act in the world, and confronted with the what I would describe as imponderables about human nature and the extraordinary complexity of human society. And so anyone who purports to solve all problems with any kind of law, of course, is, in my estimation, is lying to. But on the other hand, I don't want to come off so strong on that I appear to be denouncing the structure of the law in moderate terms. I mean, what I would say about the law is it's a hell of a lot better than the alternative. The alternative is blood feud, in the criminal law, and the alternative in the tort law is unbridled power of the strong over the weak. So the law does have characteristics which, of course, are always beneficial and which do support the common good. But as I think you understand and as I tried to express in my speech, the overvaluation of the law as a corrective to all social harms, is in my view, is pernicious.
What is going on, everybody? 'Tis I, the enigma of the gun airwaves, Miyanovich, welcoming you to Season 3 of the Liberal Gun Owner's Lens podcast, where unprecedented perspectives are packed into the cargo hold for the LGO Lens spaceship Voyagio.
That's fucking Italian.
Don't believe that evolution is possible with guns and public safety in America? It's already happening, y'all. Minds are evolving. Think guns versus public safety is the only game in town, do ya? Think culture war is the big boss, do ya? Then keep your ass in the past. Everyone else, all aboard! Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Liberal Gun Owner's Lens podcast. 'Tis I, Miyanovich, the Kmart tier Montesquieu of gun thinkers, back at you with another doozy of a podcast. While I consider each of our guests as important, and most all of our conversations as unprecedented, my chair affords me the ability to occasionally link up with a mind so rare that it is apparent to me that the conversation I am having is the brand of conversation that I like to call ripping space-time fabric. And so it is with attorney John S. Beckmann. You will notice in this series that I do not say very much, and that is because these episodes are here to give John a rare opportunity to uncork his flow. And boy howdy does he ever. I was more than happy to just sit back and listen to an advanced mind say advanced things. Do yourself a favor and make the time to go onto YouTube and search for the term John S. Beckmann, Law's Empire. That's John S. Beckmann, Law's Empire. 2 N's on that, Beckmann. You should be able to find a local TED Talk that was held in Horace Park, Minnesota, at which John delivers a lecture on the totalizing, excessive nature of American law. If you are seeking some proper sobriety as it pertains to the nexus between gun rights and public safety, I cannot recommend John's lecture enough. His commentary on the general reality of law has many implications for the world of guns. In essence, the nature of law in America is a totalizing system which seeks to influence behaviors in all human affairs. And while the law does have positive and irreplaceable impacts on our society, the totalizing nature of it is pernicious and leads us all to overestimate its importance and its efficacy. The totalizing nature of the rule of law in America has only one place that it can go, and that is to the collapse of law's legitimacy. Please join me for what I consider a once-in-a-lifetime conversation with an entirely rare mind, the attorney and legal philosopher, John Beckmann. So, John Beckmann, welcome to the Liberal Gun Owner's Lens podcast, man. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. It's a privilege.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being open to this. We're going to talk about why it is that I initially contacted you eventually in the podcast. I was aware of you. I've been aware of a talk that you gave, a TED Talk that you gave a couple years ago when I first started to look into the nexus between the gun reality and the legal reality. And I can't quite remember exactly how I found you, but I did. And that's the reason why you're here today, is we're gonna talk about this talk that you gave called Law's Empire that I saw in a YouTube video that you did at the Horace Park TED Talk.
Yes.
That was like 9 years ago, something
2014.
Like that? Okay, so about 10 years ago at this point.
Yes.
But before we talk about that, because that's a quite a rich conversation. How did you get into the law? Like, what interested you to become a lawyer?
Default. I was a literature major, so there was nothing else I could do with my education. It's been a long time. I am a member of the bar since 1979, so that dates me. But I didn't go into the law with any great expectations, and didn't go into law with any kind of crusading mentality. I mean, I went in to see what was there and to do what I could.
Did you have like an interest in the law, like just as a person? That's kind of, you were like, hey, that seems like.
Yes. I've certainly developed a more comprehensive interest in it than I had when I started practicing law, because as you practice, you encounter all sorts of real world situations, which contradict to some extent what you've been taught.
And I reviewed your bio a little bit for the firm that you work for. The firm that you work for right now, you've been with them this entire time. Like, as soon as you passed the bar, you got a job with them and you've been there the whole time.
That is true. I came here in, again, 1979, and I've never seen a reason to leave. So okay. That's, and I'm in a small town in southern Minnesota.
And did you have like an interest in constitutional law, or where the law connects to maybe the greater functioning of the country and things of that nature?
Yes.
Prior to this? Okay.
Yeah, yes. I was interested in constitutional law when I was in law school, and found it to be an interesting topic, something for which I had some facility.
Yeah. Once
you get into the actual practice of law, however, your theoretical interests are generally drowned by the day-to-day exigencies of practicing law. You have to scramble all the time to meet the needs of your clients. And so the kind of more theoretical analysis of legal issues is something that I haven't had a lot of time for, but as I get older, I'm interested in it.
Yeah, it's quite technical, and it's too technical for my brain. Like, my brain likes the philosophical round way of looking at things. It likes context and concepts and the wider reality, not just of law, but generally speaking. It really is a wrench for me to have to get down to the nitty gritty. So I'm like a big picture kind of a guy. But that's one of the reasons why I was attracted to your talk, the TED talk that you gave, because in that talk, you actually get philosophical. You get quite wide. And I related to it a lot, specifically because the question that I don't want to rely on this country's understanding of the nexus between law and guns and public safety. I don't want to rely on what's already out there. I really want to investigate it myself. And so I don't know how we do that without broadening to the philosophical reality. That's been the only vehicle that I could really find that helps to do that. And so that's why I resonated with your talk. So let me start off by saying this, or maybe going down this road a little bit. What I've found, and maybe you found the same thing in life, when somebody is involved in an industry or a particular practice, they are automatically a proponent for that thing, right? Their knob for being a proponent is turned up to 10, and oftentimes the knob where they would criticize the industry that they're in is turned down to 1. So they're more apt to buy into this thing that I'm involved in is the best product, the best service, the best industry, the best way to do things. And what I've found in reviewing much of the legal literature and other literature related to law and human behavior, the social sciences, you don't find that very much. Like, I don't find many lawyers saying, you know what, there's a bunch of stuff about the law the way we do it that's kind of full of shit. Kind of, we're doing it wrong, or we are not doing this quite. It's not what we think it is, right? So what attracted me to your talk was that you were criticizing quite reasonably the way that we deal with the law here in the United States. So do you find that also, that maybe amongst lawyers, that lawyers don't necessarily back up and look at law in the broad spectrum and say, hey, maybe we're not doing this right? Do you find that?
Yes. The practice of law is different from the theoretical analysis of jurisprudence, which is a separate sort of consideration or deliberation. In the practice of law, it's casuistic in the sense that what you're doing is you're dealing with a specific set of facts, and those facts are embedded in a matrix of complicated, in some instances, legal principles. Your role is one of advocacy, and so your position is not broadly philosophical or even jurisprudential. It's essentially a technical exercise of using the instruments that are available for you for the benefit of your clients. There's no question that lawyers, you give lawyers too much credit when you say they buy into the system. They don't buy into the system at all. They don't even think about it. To them, the system is the water they swim in. They don't even consider alternatives most typically, because that doesn't, you can't bill that, for one thing. And we live in a world in which we have to make money by billing hours or winning cases. And so economic considerations and technical trade guild considerations, as it were, keep lawyers from being very self-reflexive. I mean, we don't typically reflect. So I would even say that lawyers don't buy into the system. In fact, most lawyers are quite contemptuous of the system, if they speak among themselves. But they don't really care, because their objectives are different from developing a critique of the system. And most lawyers don't ever get to that point. Although again, I would defend my profession to this extent. I mean, most lawyers among themselves are generally contemptuous of some aspects of the legal profession. They certainly don't view the entire profession as being beyond reproach, and they certainly do have a sense for circumstances in which the profession perpetuates injustice, let's say.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it's an anomaly for a lawyer to consider issues of justice or jurisprudence. I mean, when a client comes into you and needs you to assist them with respect to a cause of action or some kind of legal difficulty in which they find themselves ensnared, your first reaction is to say, don't ask me for justice. I don't do justice. I do law. The legal system doesn't deliver justice. If you want justice, you'll have to appear before the great white throne or whatever you would believe it to be. The system here will only deliver a law, and the law is always understood to be a rather weak vessel in many applications. Now, the law works fine in the garden variety of cases. Most lawyers also spend their life in what I would call garden variety litigation, or treading along pathways that are well established and that do predictably deliver good results. So it's in the difficult, high stakes cases where sometimes, in many cases, the law goes awry, as it were. But in most instances, if you come in to see me with a slip and fall on someone's ice or a dog bite, we don't need to consider any jurisprudential issues there, and we'll get a good result, and the result will be fair within the parameters of what the law allows, and the outcome will generally be satisfactory. So, however, one should not place too much reliance upon the law, which is, as you know, is my thesis. Again, a subject that lawyers don't typically discuss. I mean, when you go through law school, you always ask yourself, where am I going to get the theoretical underpinnings for this practice? Who is going to stand before me and lecture to me on the issues of jurisprudence or justice or social policy considerations? When you attend law school, the first thing you discover is that the training is entirely technical. Those kinds of issues are never discussed. There is no requirement that a lawyer study any kind of jurisprudence or study any kind of philosophical texts that relate to how the law is supposed to work or what its function is. The lawyer learns about property, wills, torts, which are narrow fields, which are comprehensively taught to the lawyer, but the larger picture is never explored.
So one of the things that we've been trying to highlight is there's a gap between the power of law and what it can do, and then the perception that most people have, the layperson, the average person, about what the law can do, right? So when we have politicians and policymakers pimping policies, they often include rhetoric that where the needle goes towards this policy has a panacea-like effect on this problem that we want to address, right? That this raft of legal ideas that we're putting together and other ideas that are with the raft of legal ideas. This thing that we're presenting to you, America, is going to sweep the streets clean. It's going to do X. It's going to accomplish this amazing thing for you if you support us, right? And I have found that the layperson, when they relate to the law, they're more going to be attracted to that understanding of what laws can do than maybe a person like yourself who lives at the grindstone and understands the practicality of what law does with humans and human behavior and what it can do and what it cannot do. And that you said, it's generally a weak vessel. Well, I think in some ways, many Americans don't. Well, I guess I should say it this way. There's probably half of the country believes that it's more powerful than it is, and the other half is probably kind of questions it just generally. But from a liberal perspective, there's almost like a worship of policy. Social policy. There's like a worship of it, and there's like a belief that it has immense power. And so that gap between what it can actually do and how it's advertised, that's one of my main concerns, or one of my main areas of focus. So what do you think about that as a lawyer? You see how policy is advertised at the governmental level, and then how law actually works.
Well, it's a good question, and one that suggests to me that you know a much better quality politician than I do. The politicians that I know are concerned with getting reelected, getting money, fundraising, and revenge. So I don't see where I live anyone talking policy really at all. Now they may. I don't know of any politician in Minnesota, for instance, who is in the last 20 years at least, who has run on any policies really. They run on other things. So you maybe are in a more sophisticated jurisdiction, but where I am, no one even discusses that kind of thing. We are far beyond that now. The entire politics that I know of now is just a system of hostage taking and revenge. But of course, people do from time to time make arguments that resound in the way that you suggest. I mean, I've seen that. Those arguments are always founded upon overgeneralizations, of course, which ordinarily undercut the notion that the legal remedy that's proposed is going to be beneficial or efficacious. Again, though, one must be cautious about being overcritical, I think, also in the sense that I've evolved a lot from 2014 when I gave the speech in this context. Now that we see the rule of law under attack, I'm sort of loath to join in on that, although everything you say is cogent and correct. But so I'm a little more sanguine about the law right now, just because of what I've observed in the past years since I gave the speech. Nonetheless, it's certainly obvious that, or it should be obvious to people, although maybe it's not, that legal remedies are always going to be confronted with the reality of how people act in the world, and confronted with the what I would describe as imponderables about human nature and the extraordinary complexity of human society. And so anyone who purports to solve all problems with any kind of law, of course, is, in my estimation, is lying to you. But on the other hand, I don't want to come off so strong on that I appear to be denouncing the structure of the law in immoderate terms. I mean, what I would say about the law is it's a hell of a lot better than the alternative. The alternative is blood feud, in the criminal law, and the alternative in the tort law is unbridled power of the strong over the weak. So the law does have characteristics which, of course, are always beneficial and which do support the common good. But as I think you understand, and as I tried to express in my speech, the overvaluation of the law as a corrective to all social harms, is in my view, is pernicious. Although let me add, I don't really see people where I am saying that, because no one here is capable of even making that argument. I mean, they will just they run on personality. I'm the guy you need because I'm the guy who's going to, quote, fix whatever is wrong, without even defining in many instances what's wrong. So, there's an ad on TV for Noble Gold, which I'm not pitching for them. In fact, I'm doing the opposite, where these people are sitting in this sylvan idyllic setting and they're having a salad outdoors, which is where people always go to eat their salads, I guess, on TV, particularly when they're dying of some loathsome disease. And they're sitting out there and someone says, well, we need to invest in gold to deal with this, quote, economic disaster we're all experiencing. It's like, well, where the hell is this economic disaster? I don't see, people starving to death in the streets. So, but this is a component of politics. You have to invent straw men to knock them down. And that's how politicians get elected, is they invent crises, and then they develop some sort of theory as to how they're going to correct it, which is never specified when they're running. It's just, I'm the guy who can correct it.
Yeah. So just to make sure that we're clear about it, and I'm on the record certainly with this, is I'm not seeking anarchy. Like I think the rule of law is a positive. It's what happens after we accept that this is how we do things, and this is something that we do, and we've been doing it for hundreds of years, and it does bring us benefit. There's no doubt about that. I like you, I wouldn't want to find out what the alternative is. And we know, I think empirically, that the societies that have it do better than the societies that don't. That seems like it's a super obvious statement by me, but it's just a fact. So yeah, we need it. And it's an important phenomenon by far. But I think what I see us heading into as a society is we have all of this tribalism going on. We have all of this, regressive behavior, rule of law being challenged, like you said. I just want everything on the table, and let's talk about what's real and what's not, right? And so I think for us to get better effect out of the rule of law, we need to be able to say, well, what's the crazy make-em-ups about it? What are the myths here? So I don't know if you've ever read the Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. Common Law book, but it's basically a collection of his lectures. Yeah. So, and a friend of mine who's a lawyer is the person who gave it to me. So the first lecture, it's like 20 pages. It's on liability. And I recommend, it's called Liability. And I recommend that for anybody that wants to get a good human understanding, anthropologic understanding of what's up with humans and the law and rules and third-party punishment and all of that. That really grounds me. That just that 20 pages can really ground a person. Holmes he sobers you up, about expectations, I think, in that area. And that was like the thing that gave me feet. And then after that, I wanted to understand deterrence, right? What are the realities of deterrence? And we've been calling it the myth of maximum deterrence. And that is what happens when federal politicians, because we're facing the gun control platform. Most of us are going to want to vote for Democrats. We find that the Democrats are highly illiberal in many ways. We think that the definition of liberalism has been captured and toxified. There's so many issues with it now, but we're gun-owning liberals who believe in the right to self-preserve and self-defense and the Second Amendment. So what we have to look at is what's happening with the Democrats and the gun control platform. And so when I'm talking about like all of this advertisement about policy power and things like that, that's usually what I'm talking about, is when Joe Biden gets up on the TV and he goes, we're going to get these weapons of war off the streets and these mass shootings are happening. And how we deal with that are going to be these 5 policy points where we go after the implement of the gun and et cetera, et cetera. So when I look at that, what I see as somebody who has been studying human psychology through my relationship with Buddhism for decades is ideas simply don't have power over human behavior often. Like ideas come from the prefrontal cortex. A lot of behaviors come from the brainstem. We have a midbrain. We have impulses. We have desires. We're humans. Like you say, there's a mysterious element to us. And the idea that somehow somebody thinks about something, formalizes it into some vehicle of officialdom and puts it on a book, that somehow that's going to get out in front of everything that humans do and solve our problems. So there's a limit to this idea of deterrence, which starts, hundreds of years ago with Beccaria and Bentham, who basically are the ones that influenced our deterrence theory or rational choice theory as well. I want deterrence to be put into its place. And it doesn't seem like the system does that. It doesn't seem like America knows that that's even a thing, where we all sit down around the table and go, okay, if we're going to make law a better, more effective thing, we have to be honest about what it can and can't do. And that starts with contouring and deterring human behavior in the way that we want through these vehicles. It simply doesn't have a magical power. So what do you think generally about the law and deterrence in human behavior?
Well, the question of deterrence is to some degree imponderable because you can't really measure who it deters. In other words, someone who has been deterred to the extent that they don't commit a crime, they don't turn up as a statistic. Now, there may be some sociology or psychology on that, but that's one of the problems. Obviously, the notion of deterrence, to me at least, is flawed in many respects, and this is based on pragmatic considerations that I would cite to you. It's quite evident that deterrence works when, for instance, when I'm driving to Minneapolis and I don't want to speed. I know there's a law. The law says that if I speed, I can be arrested. I know that there are cops hovering around the freeway, and I've been stopped enough times to know that I'm not immune to that form of deterrence. And so deterrence works perfectly fine for traffic situations in most cases, I think. Most people drive about the same speed because they know that they can get stopped. Deterrence works to limit or control what I call crimes of opportunity. A crime of opportunity is like shoplifting. Someone is in a store and they decide for some reason they're going to steal a lipstick or some little knickknack, and probably most people, I think, would consider the effect on their career and their life if they got arrested for shoplifting. So a crime of opportunity, which is one like even to some degree embezzlement. Though I think the criminal statutes do have a deterrent effect with respect to those kinds of matters. Now, of course, what I haven't said is that criminal statutes have a deterrent effect with respect to homicide, rape, or significant assaults, or for that matter, something that's very rare in my experience, but premeditated crime. No one is deterred from murder, for instance, or even manslaughter by consideration of statutes. No one is deterred from committing a sexual assault because of statute. And there are many reasons for that. First, there's a fiction that everyone knows the law. That's a legal fiction. In the statutes and in statutory construction and in the criminal law, it's presumed that everyone knows the law. That of course, is untrue. If everyone knew the law, I'd be out of a job. So clearly, people don't know the law, and I would defy you to find someone who's got a baseball bat in their hand who says, well, instead of beating this guy with the bat, which will result in a third felony, I'll just hit the guy with my fist, and that'll result in a third or fourth degree misdemeanor. Particularly with respect to issues relating to the severity of the offense, no one knows the law, including me. You'd have to look it up each time, and every time I'm about to commit a felony, I guess I have to look and see if I would prefer to commit a misdemeanor, although one of the same sort. So the fiction that people know the law and that they can know the law sufficiently to be deterred by the law is also a significant problem. Obviously, people who are in the throes of homicidal passion or lust aren't thinking reasonably. They're certainly not engaging in any deliberative analysis of the consequences of their conduct, and they certainly, therefore, aren't going to be deterred by the law. Reason doesn't apply to most crimes of passion, and I would tell you that based on my limited experience in the criminal justice system, I worked in it for maybe 8 or 9 years. The crimes are almost always crimes of passion, and therefore would not be deterred. The third and related point that one would make on this subject is that many people who commit crimes are mentally challenged. I mean, when you talk to some of these people and they come in to see you, you say, Jesus, you must have been crazy to do that. And I don't mean that metaphorically. Lots of crimes are committed by people who are psychotic, severely depressed, mentally ill in some respect, and obviously, again, deterrence, which is a concept based upon reason, isn't going to work in those cases. Lastly, and most obviously, which I don't see people cite very often, is just about every crime that you see is committed under the influence of alcohol. Almost all serious crimes arise from the use of alcohol or meth. Out in the country where I am, methamphetamine. So if someone is blitzed out of their mind on whiskey or been smoking crack all day, they aren't going to be deterred by anything really. And years ago, I represented a guy who had killed his uncle, and he killed his uncle with a stick. He beat him with a stick until he was dead, and he did that because his uncle had criticized the way he was mowing his lawn. Okay, this was a perfectly good guy. I mean, there but for the grace of God go I. This guy was perfectly reasonable when I met him in the prison, and he was really a fine guy in every respect except the fact that he beat his uncle to death with a stick. Obviously, he was, or in my estimation, there's no way he would have been deterred by the criminal justice statute because the guy was out of his mind with intoxicant when he killed the guy. So, and this is not well understood among people who watch TV shows about crimes. Most crimes are not the result of a deliberative process by a mastermind who is sitting somewhere and making sinister plots. Most crimes are committed by poor bastards who are completely drunk. And those guys aren't going to be deterred. Finally, on the question of deterrence, the whole issue of deterrence relies upon another fiction, which is a fiction of free will. I don't think people have free will. I've never seen any evidence of that in my life. I mean, people act according to impulses of neurons in their brains over which they have little or no control. Where is the free will secreted in the brain? Is the brainstem the source of free will, or is it in the frontal cortex, or where is it? It doesn't exist. And that sets aside the whole issue of the matrix of the social economic situation and the psychological situation in which the person acts. Now, I don't believe in free will. I've never seen any evidence that it exists. But I would also say it's really not a concept we should jettison, because if we jettison that concept, the alternatives are also unacceptable. But you have to have free will in order to choose to obey a statute. If you don't have that ability, and I would submit to you that in most cases where people have committed heinous offenses, as opposed to what I call crimes of opportunity, the person really had no choice. I mean, I've often thought, when I think about back on the felonies I've committed, I would always say I really didn't have a choice. And I certainly wasn't, when I was doing those things, I wasn't analyzing what the possible consequences for me would be. So, for deterrence to work, let's say it this way: deterrence is what we call in the law legal fiction. I don't think it is applicable. For instance, murderers, they always say that when I worked in penitentiary, I did that for a few years. They always said that murderers were the most kindly, gentle, tractable type of prisoner because the person they were going to kill was the only person they would kill. In other words, if you're going to kill someone, you're going to kill your wife. Maybe beat your kid to death. You're not likely to go out in the street and just kill some third person. That's why these school shootings disturb people so much, because they violate the rule of nature, which is that most crimes are committed inside the family, crimes of violence. And the school shooting looks different because it involves stranger-inflicted violence. So the problem with these kinds of conversations, which are important to have, is that you have to ask what the alternative would be. The alternative before Cesare Beccaria was torture and mutilation. You can get maximum deterrence if you disembowel someone and show him his internal organs while he's dying. I mean, that's what they used to do. Samuel Pepys, went to an execution like that, and he said the guy looked as cheerful as you could under those circumstances. The concept of public execution with torture, which is what Beccaria was against, and which he argued strongly against in his book, is that's certainly a type of deterrence of the most spectacular kind, really. I mean, everyone's going to see that and make a determination they aren't going to act that way. But of course, it did work. And we know from Steven Pinker, the world was a lot more violent when they had torture. The world is less violent, and we find, for instance, that when countries abolish the capital punishment penalty, crime goes down, doesn't go up. So that certainly cuts against the notion of any kind of deterrence based upon grisly penalties. Or even any kind of deterrence, in my estimation, based upon what we now have, which is this carceral state in which everyone goes to jail. You control the underclass by putting them all in jail. So, deterrence really has its limits. By But the question I have is, again, with Beccari, I mean, his idea was, well, it'd be better to have swift and prompt and sure punishment than submit people to being boiled alive or whatever they were doing before in Milan before he wrote that book. The question here is, what's the alternative to deterrence? I mean, I think your analysis, though, implies the alternative. There's no alternative to deterrence, but we need not to, we should not overvalue it. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, I don't know, I don't see any alternative to a deterrent. Now, and again, I would say deterrence works great if you got the bad guy in a cage somewhere, locked up. He can't come out and do anything to me or my family. But so that is a form of I don't really call that deterrence. I mean, that's something else where you just take the person out of society and lock them up. Again, query whether that does any good either, because once you let them out, you've got someone who's been turned feral by being in a cage for several years and may be even a worse menace when they're released from prison. So the danger here, of course, is always overgeneralizing. I mean, someone will say, well, if we have the right kind of law, for instance, on these school shooting things, which terrify people, although they're statistically, in my view, insignificant. I mean, I think your kid has got a lot more chance of being sexually molested by the teacher or run over by the school bus than being gunned down in the corridors of his elementary school. So, I mean, people always overestimate risk, too, and the overestimation of risk is based upon media coverage or perceived proximity of the risk. I mean, every town has a school. And in every school, presumably a bunch of little kids could be gunned down. Again, from a statistical point of view, and I don't have the numbers, but I would guess that from a statistical point of view, the risk of your child being gunned down in a school is fundamentally inconsequential. It's like a very, very evil and sick lottery that you won if your kid gets killed. So what happens then is that people underestimate the actual risks. Again, I just in my career as a lawyer, seen a hell of a lot more kids killed by buses or injured by being beat up on a bus or being raped on a bus, which is where there's a bus driver, within 20 seats, than little kids being gunned down in the schoolyard. So again, I think one would be right to say that you're not going to deter a school shooting. School shootings are always fall into the category of some sort of event involving mental illness and I would say access to guns, and I would say some sort of failure in the system. I mean, generally, people who do this have been giving some kind of red flags. That said, everyone always says, well, we'll fix school shooting. It's equally idiotic overgeneralization. We'll fix school shooting by gathering up all the mentally ill and doing something to them. I don't know what we would do to them, but there's this notion, well, we'll do something to them or with them. Well, what is that something? Particularly when the mental health system in this country is completely broken.
Yeah, and also statistically, mentally ill people are far more likely to be the victims of a crime or to do something to themselves than they are to act out. It's a very small segment of the mentally ill that end up acting out violently towards other people. So what are you going to do? You're going to try to address all mentally ill people when the vast majority of them aren't doing anything wrong.
Yeah, it's a false again, that to use your word is a panacea. I mean, you say, well, we're going to get a handle on this from the basis of mental illness. Now, the alternative on the school shooting thing is something which is sort of metaphysically and morally unsatisfactory to people, which is to say that these kinds of things happen. From time immemorial, these kinds of tragedies occur. These things are rare, probably unavoidable in most circumstances, and probably unforeseeable. So that kind of violence, you're going to have to accept on the basis of the legal maxim "shit happens," which a lot of people are going to have trouble with that. I mean, the whole genius of the common law, which is also its failing, and this is Blackstone said this. He said, wherever there is a wrong, there must be a remedy. Okay, Blackstone believed that, and he developed a complicated system to demonstrate that based on the English common law, which was not codified, of course. So he was looking at the system of writs and cases and things to show that there were remedies for all wrongs. That of course can't be true. I mean, that just is not something we could accept as being accurate. But The idea of the law is that it will always find a remedy. When something horrible happens, there is an outcry in which people seek to urge those in power to find a remedy. When one would say that the remedy doesn't exist. It can't exist when you're dealing with rare, unforeseeable, and perverse events.